Donald Trump believed tariffs would bring China to heel, that squeezing Beijing through economic pressure would force concessions and restore U.S. dominance. But what followed wasn't capitulation. It was recalibration. China didn't just weather the pressure. It adapted to it. While Washington tightened trade restrictions and blacklisted companies, Beijing doubled down on long-term planning, pouring billions into semiconductors, artificial intelligence, and renewable energy. It methodically built new alliances across Asia, Africa, and Latin America.
The dollar is falling. The empire is fading. But your voice is rising. Don't just watch history happen. Be part of it. Why'd have you checkmark subscribe to this channel for more fearless analysis from Richard Wolff and voices the mainstream media refuses to platform?
Away from U.S. markets and weakening America's grip on global trade. Behind the scenes, China's control over rare earth elements, the raw materials behind every smartphone, missile system, and electric vehicle, became a silent but decisive counterweight. The very leverage the U.S. thought it held was quietly being eroded, replaced by a more patient and deliberate strategy that outlasted election cycles and short-term politics. What this shift reveals is a deeper miscalculation, not about power itself, but about time. While the U.S. pursued immediate wins through tariffs and sanctions, China played a generational game, building self-sufficiency and influence piece by piece. The result is a new global balance where American pressure no longer dictates outcomes, and economic coercion yields diminishing returns. China's mix of resource control, technological ambition, and geopolitical outreach has redefined the rules of engagement, signaling not just a challenge to U.S. leverage, but the emergence of a multipolar world in which no single power can dominate unilaterally. Donald Trump thought he could strong-arm China into submission with tariffs, sanctions, and economic pressure. But like almost everything else he touches, whether it's healthcare, immigration, or basic diplomacy, this too is unraveling into a mess of unintended consequences and strategic blunders. The so-called leverage he bragged about during his first term and now continues to parade in his second term isn't just failing. It's actively pushing the United States into a corner while China tightens its grip on the future. Let's be brutally honest. Trump misread the room. He saw trade as a zero-sum game, as if bullying your biggest competitor into short-term concessions was enough to hold global dominance. But China never played that game. While Trump focused on tariffs and self-congratulatory press conferences, Beijing played the long game, quietly, deliberately, and relentlessly. China's leadership has never been about the next quarter or the next election. Their strategy is rooted in decades of planning. While the U.S. ricochets between political crises, government shutdowns, and legislative gridlock, China is investing in a future plans to dominate. It's not just about making money. It's about redefining global power. They've poured massive resources into becoming technologically self-sufficient. Semiconductors? They're building their own. Artificial intelligence? They're developing their own ecosystems. Renewable energy? China is the global leader in solar panels and electric vehicles. Rare earths? China doesn't just mine them. It controls 90% of the global refining capacity. That means while Trump tries to play hardball, China controls the materials that make hardball possible. Trump's tariffs didn't cripple China. They lit a fire under Beijing's resolve to break away from U.S. supply chains. The result? China is now rapidly diversifying its trade relationships and cutting down its dependence on American markets and technology. While Trump was too busy yelling about winning, China was building new export routes through Southeast Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Through the Belt and Road Initiative and debt diplomacy, they've created a global economic web, one where America isn't the spider at the center anymore. And it's not just about trade. It's about influence. Economic leverage translates into political power. China's foothold in Africa, its rising clout in Latin America, and its partnerships across Asia are buying Beijing a say in how global rules are written. The balance of power is shifting, not because the U.S. is being attacked, but because it's being outmaneuvered by a rival who understands strategy, patience, and discipline. Meanwhile, Trump's America is looking inward, divided and unstable. From the chaos of January 6th to the return of MAGA-driven isolationism, America's image abroad is in tatters. Allies are wary. Institutions are fraying. And economic policy under Trump's second term is more about slogans and substance. America first has become America alone, and it shows. Trump's tariffs and sanctions haven't isolated China. They've isolated the United States. As Beijing strengthens its ties abroad, the U.S. is bleeding influence, watching longtime allies drift and new partnerships form without them. It's a multipolar world now, and Trump has no idea how to navigate it. Let's talk about the tech war. Trump's bans on Huawei and other Chinese tech companies were supposed to be knockout punches. But here's the twist. Those bans only accelerated China's quest to build its own technology stack. And they're doing it fast. The bifurcation of global tech into Western and Chinese ecosystems is no longer a theoretical future. It's here. Two incompatible digital worlds, each with its own hardware, software, and standards. And every time Trump doubles down on sanctions, he just adds fuel to that fire. The irony? China isn't isolated. It's becoming the center of its own orbit. The global digital divide is becoming real, and the U.S. isn't ready for it. Trump thought he could contain China with economic force. Instead, he helped create a rival infrastructure that's increasingly immune to American influence. Let's look at the supply chain crisis. Remember when the U.S. realized just how dependent it is on China for key materials? That wasn't a fluke. It was a wake-up call. China controls a majority of the world's rare earth elements, the stuff that makes smartphones, electric cars, and military equipment run. When Trump imposes sanctions, China can retaliate without firing a shot by simply turning off the tap. And while the U.S. scrambles to find alternatives, China sits comfortably at the top of the value chain. Sure, the U.S. and its allies are trying to build new supply chains. But it takes years, decades, even. Trump doesn't do decades. He barely does weeks. All of this comes while China leads a transition to green industries. They're not just building electric vehicles. They're exporting them en masse. They're not just making solar panels. They're making 80% of them globally. As the world shifts toward green energy, China is already positioned to dominate, while Trump is still shouting about coal and ripping up climate agreements. Yes, China has internal problems. No one's denying that. Youth unemployment, a spiraling property market, and growing social discontent are real challenges. But these are long-term domestic issues. They haven't disrupted China's external strategy. Not yet. And that's what Trump doesn't get. He assumes that if you rattle China a bit, it'll collapse like a house of cards. But the reality is far more complex. China's internal issues might slow it down, but they haven't broken its momentum. If anything, they've made the leadership more determined to be globally self-reliant. The contrast is stark. China's long-term vision is built on continuity, stability, and state-led investment. Trump's U.S. is a whirlwind of chaos, culture wars, and political whiplash. The Chinese Communist Party might be authoritarian, but it's consistent. Trump can't even keep the White House staff stable for 6 months. How can you wage a generational economic war with that level of dysfunction? That's the heart of the miscalculation. Trump thought economic warfare would stop China. He thought being loud meant being effective. But while Trump ranted, China built. While the U.S. burned bridges, China built trade routes. While MAGA chased conspiracy theories, China poured billions into R&D. And let's not forget the unintended consequences. Every sanction, every tariff, every ban meant to hurt China has also damaged the U.S. economy. American farmers, manufacturers, and tech companies are feeling the pain. Global companies are adjusting. And Trump? He's still tweeting nonsense while pretending it's all part of some 4D chess strategy. But this isn't a game. This is the global economy. And the United States is losing its grip because its leader is playing checkers while Beijing plays Go. So what happens now? The world is shifting. American unilateral dominance is over. The future isn't about one country setting the rules. It's about many powers negotiating them. And China will be at that table. Not as a junior partner, but as a peer. That's not defeatism. That's the reality Trump refuses to accept. It's not just about China rising. It's about the U.S. stumbling under the weight of its own contradictions. Economic fragility, political chaos, and a leader who thinks shouting into a microphone is the same as global strategy. If the U.S. wants to reclaim leverage, It needs more than tariffs and tough talk. It needs strategic vision, long-term planning, and domestic resilience, none of which Trump offers. His playbook is outdated, reactive, and damaging. He's not countering China. He's handing them the future. If you found this breakdown valuable, don't forget to like this video, share it with your network, and leave a comment with your thoughts below. Make sure to subscribe for more unfiltered, fact-driven analysis you won't find on cable news. The truth matters, especially when those in power refuse to face it. Here's the hard truth. Trump's approach to China is the geopolitical equivalent of setting fire to your own house to smoke out a burglar. He's burned American credibility, scorched global trust, and turned economic diplomacy into a game of petty revenge, all while China keeps building, strategizing, and expanding its influence without needing to shout a single word. And the worst part? This isn't just about Trump. It's about a U.S. political system that can't keep up. While China invests with a 30-year horizon, the U.S. is stuck in a 24-hour news cycle. Policies change with the polls. Strategy dies in the Senate. Vision is reduced to viral sound bites. It's dysfunction versus discipline. And right now, dysfunction is losing. Just look at the Belt and Road Initiative. For years, Washington laughed it off as a bloated vanity project. But now, it's a global infrastructure network with over 150 countries signed on in some form. Ports, railways, energy grids, all backed by Chinese loans and Chinese labor. This isn't charity. It's leverage. It's future influence disguised as development aid. And what did Trump offer instead? Trade wars, isolation, bluster. China didn't just outmaneuver the U.S. diplomatically. It did so quietly and effectively. While Trump was busy insulting NATO, alienating Europe, and pulling out of multilateral trade agreements, China was writing the rules for new ones. While MAGA screamed about bringing jobs home, China deepened its manufacturing dominance, making itself even harder to replace. Now, let's talk about what that dominance actually looks like. China isn't just the world's factory anymore. It's the architect of tomorrow's industrial base. Solar energy, electric vehicles, AI, 5G, these aren't side hustles. These are the engines of future economic growth, and China is driving them at full speed. In electric vehicles alone, China is so far ahead it's almost laughable. Tesla might have kicked off the EV revolution, but now it's BYD and other Chinese manufacturers that are exporting to Europe, Latin America, and the Middle East. They're affordable, efficient, and mass-produced at scale the U.S. can't even touch. Trump, meanwhile, keeps ranting about saving the internal combustion engine. It's a joke, and the planet is the punchline. On renewable energy, China dominates solar panel production so completely that U.S. manufacturers can't compete without massive subsidies. And even then, they're barely holding on. The irony? Trump's anti-China tariffs on solar materials only made green energy more expensive in the U.S., slowing down domestic adoption while China cornered the market. And AI? China isn't waiting for permission. They're deploying facial recognition, data analytics, and machine learning tools across every level of governance and industry. Sure, it's an authoritarian model, but from a tech development standpoint, they're moving fast, scaling aggressively, and building infrastructure the U.S. hasn't even started designing. Trump's answer? More tariffs, more bans, more reactive measures that fail to address the root of the problem. China's rise isn't just economic. It's systemic. It's strategic. And under Trump, the U.S. isn't responding with counter-strategy. It's responding with panic. The rare earths issue might be the clearest example of just how precarious this situation has become. These are materials critical to everything from fighter jets to smartphones to wind turbines. China has near total control over refining them. The U.S. once led this industry. It let it go. Now, Trump is scrambling to bring it back with no plan, no facilities, and no timeline. Just slogans, just fear, just delay. Meanwhile, China can turn the dial anytime it wants. Cut off supply, slow down shipments, impose export restrictions. And the entire Western tech industry would feel it overnight. That's real leverage. That's power. And Trump handed it to them while pretending he was taking it away. You can't tweet your way out of a resource monopoly. And while this dangerous game unfolds, the domestic picture in the U.S. looks increasingly unstable. Political polarization is off the charts. Congress can't pass meaningful legislation. Federal agencies are understaffed, underfunded, and under attack. And American businesses are caught in the middle, staring down the barrel of disrupted supply chains, rising costs, and an uncertain global role. Trump doesn't offer stability. He offers spectacle. He doesn't solve crises. He manufactures them. And that unpredictability isn't just a domestic liability. It's a global warning sign. Allies no longer trust that the U.S. will be consistent. Institutions don't trust that their funding will last. Multinational firms are hedging bets. The world is adjusting to a new reality. American dominance can no longer be taken for granted. Now, let's be clear. China isn't without its own vulnerabilities. The property market is a ticking time bomb. Youth unemployment is alarmingly high. There's growing discontent among younger generations about economic stagnation, censorship, and opportunity. These are real, potentially destabilizing forces. But China has one thing the U.S. doesn't: strategic cohesion. When things go wrong, the leadership doesn't dissolve into televised chaos and Twitter rants. It recalibrates. Quietly, efficiently, ruthlessly. Trump, on the other hand, doesn't recalibrate. He doubles down, even when it's clear the tariffs aren't working, even when the allies are drifting, even when businesses are begging for predictability. He refuses to admit failure, refuses to course correct, and refuses to learn. That's not strength. That's ego masquerading as leadership, and it's costing the U.S. dearly. Because every time Trump lashes out without a strategy, he accelerates the very trends he claims to fear. China's push for independence becomes more urgent. Its global partnerships grow tighter. Its economy becomes more resilient. And the world continues to adapt to a new order where U.S. leverage is no longer a guarantee. This is the price of miscalculation, of underestimating your rival and overestimating your own position, of thinking economic dominance can be maintained through bluster rather than planning. Trump thought he could bully China into retreat. Instead, he gave him the perfect excuse to surge ahead. And now, the U.S. is staring down a geopolitical landscape it no longer controls. This isn't a temporary setback. It's a structural shift. The global economy is fragmenting into competing systems. The digital world is splitting in two. Trade routes are being rewritten. Alliances are being reshaped. And at the center of it all is a China that has grown stronger, faster, and more influential, not in spite of Trump's actions, but because of them. So what's the takeaway? Trump's leverage on China isn't working. It never worked. It was built on outdated assumptions, shallow analysis, and a fundamental misunderstanding of how power operates in the 21st century. He confused tariffs with strategy. He mistook noise for influence, and he let ideology blind him to reality. Meanwhile, China played the long game, and they're winning it. If the U.S. wants to reclaim its footing, it needs leaders who understand complexity, who can think beyond headlines, who can build alliances instead of destroying them, who can invest in the future rather than retreat into nostalgia. Trump is not that leader. He never was. And every day he clings to power, China gets another opening, another advantage, another step closer to defining the global future on its own terms. And here's the final blow. Trump doesn't even realize the damage is permanent. You don't just flip a switch and rebuild trust with allies. You don't just slap a new slogan on a broken supply chain. You don't recover lost ground by doubling down on failed policies. The world watched the United States fumble its response to China's rise, and they're not waiting around for Washington to figure it out. While Trump was busy branding tariffs as toughness, China was redefining global systems, quietly, methodically, and effectively. Now we have two ecosystems, two trade networks, two technological realities. And the U.S.? It's stuck trying to play catch-up with a playbook from the 1980s. Even Trump's base, American workers, manufacturers, farmers, have seen that this war of economic attrition isn't hitting China the way he promised. It's hitting them. It's their crops rotting in warehouses, their costs rising, their markets vanishing. But Trump just keeps spinning the same tired narrative, hoping no one notices the ground shifting beneath their feet. Well, it has shifted. We're in a new era now, one where the U.S. can't bully its way to dominance, one where China is a peer competitor, not a junior player. Trump thought he could stop time with a tariff. Instead, he accelerated a global transformation and weakened the very leverage he claimed to strengthen. If that made you think, like this video, share it, drop a comment, and don't forget to subscribe. We break the noise with facts. Stay tuned, stay sharp. And here's the final blow. Trump doesn't even realize the damage is permanent. You don't just flip a switch and rebuild trust with allies. You don't just slap a new slogan on a broken supply chain. You don't recover lost ground by doubling down on failed policies. The world watched the United States fumble its response to China's rise, and they're not waiting around for Washington to figure it out. While Trump was busy branding tariffs as toughness, China was redefining global systems, quietly, methodically, and effectively. Now we have two ecosystems, two trade networks, two technological realities. And the U.S.? It's stuck trying to play catch-up with a playbook from the 1980s. Even Trump's base, American workers, manufacturers, farmers, have seen that this war of economic attrition isn't hitting China the way he promised. It's hitting them. It's their crops rotting in warehouses, their costs rising, their markets vanishing. But Trump just keeps spinning the same tired narrative, hoping no one notices the ground shifting beneath their feet. Well, it has shifted. We're in a new era now, one where the U.S. can't bully its way to dominance, one where China is a peer competitor, not a junior player. Trump thought he could stop time with a tariff. Instead, he accelerated a global transformation and weakened the very leverage he claimed to strengthen. If that made you think, like this video, share it, drop a comment, and don't forget to subscribe. We break the noise with facts. Stay tuned, stay sharp,